Thanksgiving at the Windermoor estate was supposed to be crystal, candlelight, and gratitude performed for an audience. Instead, it became the day my family finally said the quiet part out loud, and the day I stopped begging to be allowed to exist. To understand how it happened, you have to go back to the rain, to lilies and damp earth, to the day Grandma Evelyn died. 6 months ago. The smell of a funeral is distinct. It is not just the cloying sweetness of lilies or the chemical bite of floor wax. It is the scent of damp wool and performative sorrow. It was raining that morning in May, a relentless gray drizzle that turned the Connecticut landscape into a watercolor painting left out in a storm. I arrived at the funeral home at 45 minutes past 8 in the morning. The service was not scheduled to begin until 10, but my grandmother, Evelyn Hartwell, had drilled a specific code into my spine since I was a child early as respect. Late is an insult. The chapel was empty save for the funeral director, a man with a face like crumpled parchment, who was adjusting the angle of the casket. I walked down the center aisle, my heels making no sound on the thick burgundy carpet. I wanted a moment alone with her. I wanted to see the woman who had been the only source of unconditional light in a house built on conditions. But I was not alone for long. My mother, Marlene, emerged from a side door. She was not crying. She was holding a clipboard, in her mind. This was not a farewell to her mother. It was an event to be managed, a production to be executed with military precision. She wore a black dress that fit too perfectly, the kind of tailoring that suggests she had been planning this outfit for months. "Ria," she said, not looking up from her list. "You are here? Good. I wanted to see Grandma," I said. Marlene finally looked at me. Her eyes swept over my black suit, assessing the fabric, the cut, the appropriateness of my shoes. She gave a curt nod, the way a general acknowledges a foot soldier. "You can see her later," she said. "Right now, I need you at the entrance." "The entrance?" I asked. "The guest book," she clarified, tapping the clipboard with a manicured fingernail. "People get confused. They clog the vestibule. I need someone to stand there. Hand them a pen. Make sure they sign legibly, and direct them to the seating area. We cannot have a bottleneck when the senator arrives." I stood there, feeling the familiar coldness settle in my chest. "You want me to work the door, Mom?" "I am her granddaughter. I should be sitting with the family." Marlene sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. "Ria, do not make this about you. Sloan is too emotional to handle people right now. Dad is a wreck. I am handling the logistics. I need you to be useful. Can you do that? Can you just be useful for once?" Useful. That was the word that defined my existence in the Windermoor household. I was not the prize. I was the utility. I was the person called when the computer broke, when the dog needed walking, or when the guests needed to be ushered. "Fine," I said. I took my station by the heavy oak doors. For the next hour, I became invisible. I handed pens to men in $2,000 suits who looked through me as if I were part of the furniture. I nodded at women dabbing dry eyes with lace handkerchiefs. I accepted their coats. I pointed them toward the sanctuary. I watched the room fill up with the elite of Maplewick, a sea of black and gray, all coming to pay respects to a woman most of them barely knew. At 15 minutes past 10, the doors swung open one last time. Sloan arrived. My sister did not just enter a room. She descended upon it. She was 15 minutes late, a direct violation of Grandma's code, but no one checked their watch. She looked devastated in a way that was photogenic. Her blonde hair was pulled back loosely, a few strands escaping to frame a face that was pale and tragic. She clung to her husband's arm as if she could not stand on her own. Marlene rushed from the front row. She bypassed me completely, her heels clicking rapidly on the tile. She wrapped her arms around Sloan, cooing soft words of comfort, stroking her hair. "Oh, my poor baby," I heard Marlene whisper. I know it hurts so much." I stood 5 feet away, holding a ballpoint pen. My mother had not hugged me. She had not asked if I was hurting. She had asked if I could manage the traffic flow. Sloane looked up, her eyes swimming with tears that did not seem to ruin her mascara. She saw me. For a second, the tragedy mask slipped, and she gave me a look that was almost bored. Then she sniffed, leaned into our mother, and they walked together down the aisle to the front pew. The reserved row, the place for the people who mattered. I stayed by the book until the music started. Then I slipped into the back row, taking a seat on a folding chair next to a distant cousin who smelled of peppermint schnapps. The service was a blur of eulogies that sounded like resume readings. People spoke about Evelyn Hartwell's philanthropy, her garden club presidency, her impeccable taste. None of them spoke about the way she would sneak me extra dessert when Marlene wasn't looking, or how she taught me that the truth is the only thing worth fighting for. When it was over, the crowd shuffled out into the rain for the burial. I lingered. I did not want to stand at the graveside and watch Sloane throw the first flower while I stood behind the driver of the hearse. Rhea, the voice was deep, gravelly, like stones grinding together. I turned to see Caleb Drayton standing in the shadow of a pillar. He had been my grandmother's lawyer for 40 years. He was a man made of sharp angles and silence, wearing a raincoat that had seen better decades. "Mr. Drayton," I said. "I did not see you during the service." "I prefer the back," he said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We need to talk. Not here. Not with them." He jerked his chin toward the door where my parents were holding court. "About the will," I asked. "I assume everything goes to Mom. That is how it usually works." Caleb adjusted his glasses. He looked tired. He looked like a man carrying a heavy stone. "The estate. Yes. The house, the accounts, the investments. That is all standard. But Evelyn created a separate instrument, a codicil." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small leather notebook. He did not hand it to me. He just showed me the cover. It was worn, the edges fraying. "She left something specifically for you, Rhea." My heart did a strange, stuttering kick against my ribs. "For me, what is it?" "I cannot give it to you today," Caleb said. He put the notebook back. "She gave me strict instructions, very strict. She made me record them so there would be no ambiguity. Instructions. The package is to be held in my safe for exactly 6 months from the date of her death," Caleb said. "To the day, not a minute sooner, and it must be hand-delivered to you. No couriers, no mail." "Why?" I asked. The air in the chapel felt suddenly thin. "Why 6 months?" Caleb looked at the door. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the stained glass. "She said you needed time to see things clearly. She said grief makes people blind, but time makes them observe. She wanted you to watch them, Rhea. She wanted you to spend the next 6 months watching your family without her protection." "That sounds ominous," I said. "Evelyn was a wise woman," Caleb said. "She knew that when the matriarch dies, the cracks in the foundation start to show. She wanted you to see the cracks before she handed you the sledgehammer." He handed me a business card. On the back, he had written a date, November 28th, Thanksgiving. "Call me on this date," he said. "I will bring you what she left. Until then, keep your head down. And Rhea." "Yes. Do not trust the silence in that house," he said. "Silence is just a lie holding its breath." He turned and walked out a side exit, vanishing into the gray afternoon before I could ask another question. I drove home with Finn an hour later. The windshield wipers slapped back and forth, a hypnotic rhythm that matched the throbbing in my temples. Slap, slap, slap. Finn reached across the console and took my hand. His palm was warm, rough from his carpentry work. He was the only thing in my life that felt solid. "You okay?" he asked. "You barely said a word at the graveside." "I am fine," I said automatically. It was the reflex answer I had been trained to give. Then I stopped. I squeezed his hand. "No, I am not fine. Marlene treated me like hired help. Sloane acted like she was auditioning for a drama award, and Caleb told me Grandma left me a secret. Finn glanced at me, his eyebrows pulling together. What kind of secret? I have to wait 6 months, I said. I do not know what it is, but he looked scared. Finn, or worried, he said I need to watch them. Finn tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Watch them like a spy. Like an outsider, I said, which is what I have always been. I looked out the window as the suburbs of Connecticut rolled by. Big houses, manicured lawns, fences that were too high to see over. I thought about the hierarchy I had witnessed today. It wasn't new. It had always been there. Marlene loved Sloane because Sloane was a reflection of Marlene, beautiful, pliable, socially ambitious. Marlene tolerated me because I was an obligation. A box that had to be checked. But why most families have favorites? But this felt different. It felt like policy. It felt like a strategy. My mind drifted back to a memory from 3 years ago. It was late at night. I had come to my parents' house to drop off some paperwork for Graham. I had found Grandma Evelyn in the sunroom, sitting in the dark with a glass of sherry. She had been staring at an old photo album, but she wasn't looking at the pictures. She was looking through them. When she saw me, she didn't smile. She beckoned me over. Her hand, paper thin and trembling, had gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Rhea," she had whispered. Her voice was slurred, maybe from the sherry, maybe from the weight of whatever she was carrying. "You try so hard. You try so hard to fit into a puzzle that has no piece for you." "I am just different, Grandma," I had said, trying to soothe her. "I am the black sheep. It happens." "No," she had hissed. "A black sheep is still a sheep. You are something else entirely in this house. There was something wrong from the day you were born. The air in the hospital room was wrong. The way Graham wouldn't hold you was wrong. And your mother." She had stopped then. She had looked toward the doorway, terrified that Marlene might be listening. "What about Mom?" I had asked. "Your mother knows," Evelyn had said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "She knows that what is buried in the garden doesn't always stay dead. Sometimes it grows." I had dismissed it then as the ramblings of an old woman whose mind was starting to fray. I had poured her some water and helped her to bed. I had forgotten about it, but now, staring at the rain streaking the glass, the memory came back with the force of a physical blow. Something had been wrong from the day you were born. Caleb's words echoed in my head. "She wanted you to see the cracks." I looked at Finn. "I think Grandma knew something," I said softly. "I think she left me the proof." "Proof of what?" Finn asked. "I do not know," I said. "But for the next 6 months, I am going to stop trying to be their daughter. I am going to start being a witness." The car turned onto our street. The rain did not stop. It felt like the sky was washing the world clean. Preparing it for a new story, I did not know it then, but the clock had already started ticking. The game had begun, and I was the only player who didn't know the rules. But I had one advantage they didn't count on. I was patient, and I had been invisible for so long that I knew exactly how to watch from the shadows. 6 months, that was the sentence, and I would serve every single day of it until I could hold that envelope in my hands. I was 18 years old when I learned that potential is a currency, and my parents had decided to spend mine to save themselves, before the silence of that Thanksgiving dinner, before the funeral, and before the envelope. There was a decade of slow, methodical erasure. I was not always the ghost at the feast. Once, I was the girl with the acceptance letter from a top-tier university in Boston. I had a full scholarship. I had a plan that involved architectural school, a studio apartment with brick walls, and a life that did not involve Maplewick, Connecticut. I was the one with the grades. Sloane was the one with the smile. In any other family, my achievements would have been a ticket out. In the Windermoor house, they were merely a resource to be harvested. It happened on a Tuesday in late August, 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave. My father, Graham, came home early. He did not loosen his tie. He sat at the kitchen island, his face the color of old newspaper. There had been an incident at his firm. It was not a crime. he insisted, but a misunderstanding of compliance protocols. The result was a lawsuit that threatened to swallow the house. The cars, and the country club membership, they needed liquidity. They needed to cut costs. And most importantly, they needed to maintain the image that nothing was wrong. Marlene laid it out for me over a dinner of cold roast chicken. Sloane could not be pulled from her private arts college. Her tuition was an investment in her social standing, and pulling her out would signal to the neighbors that the Windermoors were bleeding money. Sloane was the asset. I was the overhead. "You are the strong one, Rhea," Marlene had said, pouring herself a second glass of Chardonnay. "You can handle a detour." Sloane would crumble. "We need you to stay here, work, and help us keep the ship afloat, just for a year or two." A year or two turned into 10. I gave up the scholarship. I enrolled in community college classes at night and took a job during the day at the Northbridge Public Integrity Office. It was a gray, windowless bureaucratic machine where I processed complaints about zoning violations and municipal waste. The irony of working in an office dedicated to integrity while living a life built on a lie was never lost on me. I made $42,000 a year, every 2 weeks. I transferred $700 into my parents' joint account to help with the groceries, while Sloane posted photos from her semester abroad in Florence. This was my life. I became the utility player. I was the one who drove Graham to the mechanic when his Jaguar broke down because he was too proud to take an Uber. I was the one who stayed home to wait for the plumber while Marlene and Sloane went to lunch at the club. I was the one who fixed the Wi-Fi, filed the taxes, and managed the scheduling of the cleaning crew, a crew I was not allowed to speak to like a friend, but also not allowed to command like a mistress of the house, to the outside world. However, Marlene painted a different picture. She could not admit that her daughter was supporting the household budget. That would look desperate. So she invented a character for me. I heard her do it one afternoon at a garden party I was staffing, not attending, but staffing. I was refilling the ice bucket when I heard Marlene's voice drifting over the hydrangeas. She was talking to Mrs. Galloway, the town gossip. "Oh, Rhea is just finding herself," Marlene said, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "She is a bit aimless, poor thing. She had opportunities, of course, but she just lacked the drive to leave home. Some children launch, and some just linger. We let her stay because we do not want her to feel abandoned. But she is difficult, very introverted, hard to integrate." I stood there, clutching a bag of frozen ice, and realized that my mother was not just lying. She was building a firewall by painting me as the failure who refused to leave. She immunized herself against anyone asking why I was still there. If I complained, I was just the ungrateful, aimless daughter biting the hand that fed her. I walked back to the kitchen, dumped the ice into the sink, and watched it melt. I did not scream. I learned early on that screaming only gave them ammunition. See, they would say, "She is unstable." Then Finn came along. We met at a site inspection. The integrity office had sent me to check a permit on a renovation project, and Finn Rainmere was the lead carpenter. He was covered in sawdust, holding a blueprint, and he looked at me like I was a person. Not a problem to be solved. He did not know the Windermoor name, or if he did, he did not care. Our first date was at a diner on the edge of town. I remember spilling my water glass. I immediately froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I am so sorry," I stammered, grabbing napkins, my hands shaking. "I am so sorry. I am so clumsy. I will clean it up. Please do not be mad." Finn just sat there, watching me. He did not yell. He did not sigh. He reached across the table and put his hand over mine to stop my frantic wiping. "Rhea," he said softly, "it is just water. It dries." He looked at me with a mixture of affection and confusion. "Why do you apologize for existing?" he asked. It took me a long time to answer that question. Finn was the first person to notice the chips in my armor. He saw how I flinched when a door slammed. He saw how I would check my phone constantly, terrified that I had missed a summons from Marlene, when he proposed to me 2 years later. He did not ask my father's permission. He told me later that he felt asking Graham for anything was like asking a vampire for a blood donation, but even Finn could not fully protect me from the slow, grinding erosion of my identity. The worst moments were not the big fights. We did not have big fights. We had microaggressions. We had exclusions that were so precise they had to be calculated. I started keeping a journal 3 years ago. It was a black leather notebook I kept hidden in the spare tire well of my car, the only place I knew Marlene would never look. I started writing things down because I began to doubt my own sanity. They were so good at gaslighting me that I needed a written record of reality. Entry: December 12th, 2023. The family Christmas card came today. They hired a photographer. The photo is beautiful. Mom, Dad, and Sloane are sitting by the fireplace in matching cream sweaters. The dog is there. I am not. When I asked Mom why she didn't tell me about the photo shoot, she said, "Oh, we did it last Tuesday morning. You were at that little job of yours. We didn't think you would want to take time off." Entry: February 14th, 2024. Sloane's birthday dinner. They went to Le Jardin. I found out when I saw the tag on Instagram. Caption: Family First. I called Dad. He said, "It was a last-minute thing. Rhea, besides, it is expensive. We know things are tight for you and Finn." Things were tight because I was paying their property tax installments. Entry: July 4th, 2024. Dad's retirement party. I was invited. Finally. But when the guests arrived, Mom introduced Sloane as my daughter and me as Rhea, who lives in town. She dropped the possessive. She dropped the relationship. I was just a noun standing in her hallway. It was in these moments that the feeling of being an imposter began to fester. It was not just emotional. It felt biological. I would look in the mirror and try to find them in my face. Sloane and Marlene were variations on a theme: cool blondes with delicate bone structures and eyes the color of sea glass. Graham was tall, fair, with a patrician nose. I was different. My hair was dark, thick, and unruly. My eyes were a deep, muddy hazel. My frame was broader, sturdier. "You look like your great-aunt Tess," Graham would say vaguely when I asked. But I had seen pictures of great-aunt Tess. She was a redhead who weighed 90 pounds soaking wet. The comments from extended family were the hardest to swallow because they were said without malice, which made them sting more. They were observations of fact. At a barbecue last summer, Uncle Robert, drunk on gin and tonic, clapped me on the shoulder. "You know, Rhea," he said, swaying slightly, "you are the worker bee, always have been. Sloane is the queen bee, but you have got that peasant strength, good stock. No idea where it comes from in this family of delicate flowers, but you have got it. Peasant strength." "She really does not look like the rest of you," a neighbor whispered to Marlene once. I was standing right there, holding a tray of appetizers. Marlene did not get angry. She did not defend me. She just laughed, a tinkling, brittle sound. "Well," she said, taking a shrimp from my tray without looking at me, "genetics are a funny thing. Sometimes you get a throwback. Sometimes the apple rolls a little further down the hill." She said it with such certainty. That was what haunted me in the nights leading up to the funeral. She never wondered why I was different. She accepted my difference as a fundamental truth, as if she knew exactly why the math didn't add up, but had decided to ignore the equation. Only Grandma Evelyn treated me as a whole number. I would go to her house on Sundays. It was my sanctuary. She did not ask me to fix her router. She did not ask me to serve tea. She asked me about my week. She asked me about Finn. She asked me what books I was reading. "You are too good for them," she told me once. About a year before she died, we were sitting on her porch, shelling peas. "You think you are the failure because you are not like them. But Rhea, listen to me. Being unlike them is your greatest victory." "I just want to belong." "Grandma," I said, "it is lonely being the accident." "You are not an accident," she said fiercely. She stopped shelling and looked at me with intense, watery eyes. "You are a correction. Nature has a way of balancing things out. They are hollow. Rhea, you are solid, but solidity threatens hollow things. That is why they try to chip away at you. They are afraid that if you stand too close, everyone will see how empty they are. I held on to those words. I wrote them in my journal. Solidity threatens hollow things, but even solidity has a breaking point. 6 months ago, when Caleb told me about the delay, about the secret, I went back to my journal. I read through 10 years of entries, 10 years of being the designated driver, the designated scapegoat, the designated disappointment. I looked at the entry from my wedding day. Marlene had worn white. She had told the guests that she didn't realize it was poor etiquette. In the photos, she looked radiant. I looked tired. I closed the book. I realized that I had been waiting for them to love me. I had been paying a toll to cross a bridge that they had burned down years ago. Finn was right. I was apologizing for existing, but as the days ticked down toward Thanksgiving, toward the end of the 6-month waiting period, something shifted in my blood. The sadness began to curdle into something hotter, something more volatile. I stopped transferring money. When Marlene called to ask why the property tax account was low, I told her I had car trouble. I lied. The money was sitting in a high-yield savings account under my name. "Well, fix it," she had snapped. "We have appearances to maintain." "I am trying, Mom," I said. "I am really trying." That was the last lie I told her. I was not trying to help them anymore. I was waiting. I was watching. I was counting the days until November 28th. I looked at my reflection in the mirror the morning of Thanksgiving. I wore a blazer that I had bought with my own money. I wore lipstick that was too bold for a supportive daughter. I looked at my dark hair, my broad shoulders, my peasant strength. "You do not belong to them," I whispered to the glass. And for the first time in my life, that thought did not make me want to cry. It made me want to fight. I picked up the pie. I picked up the envelope. I walked out to the car where Finn was waiting. 10 years of being useful were over. Today, I was going to be useless. Today, I was going to be dangerous. The phone rang at exactly 8 in the morning on November 28th. I was already awake. I had been awake since 4, sitting in my kitchen with a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago, watching the sun drag itself up over the horizon. Today was Thanksgiving. Today was the day the clock ran out. "Rhea," Caleb Drayton's voice was as dry as old parchment. "It is time. I am on my way," I said. I did not tell Finn where I was going. He was still asleep, exhausted from a week of overtime. I left a note saying I was going to pick up the pie from the bakery, which was technically true. But the bakery was a stop I would make after I visited the crypt of my family's secrets. Caleb's office was in a brick building downtown that smelled of dust and lemon polish. The receptionist was gone for the holiday. Caleb opened the door himself. He looked older than he had at the funeral. He wore a cardigan that hung loosely on his frame, and his eyes were rimmed with red. "Come in," he said. He did not offer me coffee. He did not ask about the weather. He walked behind his massive oak desk, unlocked a drawer with a small brass key, and pulled out an object that seemed to absorb the light in the room. It was a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with my grandmother's personal signet, a rose entangled in thorns. "She packed this herself," Caleb said, his voice low. "She sealed it the week before she went into the hospital. She told me that if I opened it, she would haunt me from the grave. I believe her." He slid it across the mahogany surface. The sound of paper sliding on wood was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "For Rhea." He read the handwriting on the front. "When you are ready." I reached out. My hand was steady. I had spent 6 months preparing for this, hardening myself like steel in a forge. I took the envelope. It was heavy. It felt dense, like a brick of compressed history. "Do you want me to leave?" Caleb asked. "No," I said. "I want a witness." I broke the wax. It cracked with a sharp snap. I slid the contents out onto the desk. There were 4 items: a letter on her personal stationery, a lab report from a genetic testing center in Boston, a photocopy of a hospital record, grainy and faded, and a small plastic bag containing a newborn's hospital bracelet. I picked up the lab report first. It was the most clinical, the most objective. I skipped the header. I skipped the methodology. My eyes went straight to the bottom of the page, to the row of numbers that defined my biology. Sample A, Rhea Windermoor. Sample B, Graham Windermoor. Relationship probability, 0%. I stared at the number, 0, not 0.1%, not inconclusive, 0. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was a strange sensation. I expected devastation. I expected the ground to open up. Instead, I felt a rush of cold vindication. It was the feeling of a detective finally finding the murder weapon. "He is not my father," I said. It was not a question. "Read the letter," Caleb said. He was watching me closely, his hands folded on the desk. I picked up the lavender stationery. The handwriting was shaky, written when her strength was failing, but the words were lucid. "My dearest Rhea, if you are reading this, then you have survived the 6 months. You have seen them as they are. You have felt the coldness of a house that does not know how to keep you warm. You are holding the DNA test. You are thinking that this is the secret. You are thinking that your mother had an affair, and Graham hates you because you are the living proof of her infidelity. You are thinking that is why you are the outcast. My darling girl, do not stop there. That would be too simple. An affair is a sin of passion. What happened to you was a sin of calculation. Look at the hospital report. Look at the bracelet. There is something more wrong than just an affair. I tried to find the rest, but they blocked me. Graham and Marlene, they are not just hiding a lover, they are hiding a transaction. You were not born into this family. Rhea, and I'm not sure you were born to Marlene at all. Find the truth. Burn it down. Love. Grandma." My hands started to tremble. "Not born to Marlene," I whispered. "But there are photos. There are photos of her pregnant." "Read the hospital report," Caleb said. I picked up the photocopy. It was an incident report from a place called Lake Doran Maternity Pavilion. The date was 34 years ago. October 14th, my birthday. Most of the text was redacted. Black bars of ink covered the names of the doctors and the nurses. But the narrative summary was visible. Subject night shift discrepancy, nursery B, details. At 2 a.m, an alarm was triggered on the perimeter door. Nurse on duty reported unauthorized access. Census count of infants showed discrepancy in bassinet 4 and bassinet 7. Security logs were subsequently cleared by administration order. Below the report, there was a photocopy of a bank transfer. It was a settlement agreement. The amount was staggering, $500,000. It was paid from an account linked to the Lake Doran administration to a trust account controlled by Graham Windermoor. The date of the transfer was 3 days after my birth. "They were paid," I said. My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from inside a tunnel. "They were paid $500,000 3 days after I was born." "Why?" "Look at the bracelet." Caleb guided me. I opened the small plastic bag. The bracelet was tiny. The plastic yellowed with age. It was the kind they put on a newborn's ankle. I held it up to the light. The ink was faded, but I could still read the typed letters on the insert. "Baby girl. Mother Windermoor. M. Number 492218. "It says Windermoor," I said. "It matches." "Turn it over," Caleb said. I flipped the tiny band. On the inside, scrawled in blue ballpoint pen the kind a hurried nurse might use, was a symbol. It was not a letter. It looked like a Greek letter. Beta, and next to it, a time, 02:15. "The incident report says the alarm was at 2 a.m, I said. "This was written 15 minutes later. Evelyn hired a private investigator 2 years ago," Caleb explained. "He found the nurse who wrote that. She is in a nursing home now. She has dementia, but when the investigator showed her that bracelet, she started crying. She said, 'The switch. The rich man took the wrong one.' The room spun." "The wrong one?" I asked. "Evelyn tried to get the court records unsealed," Caleb said. "But Graham blocked her. He has friends in the judiciary, powerful friends. They threatened to declare her incompetent. They threatened to put her in a home and take control of her assets if she didn't stop digging. That is why she stopped. She knew she couldn't win while she was alive. She needed someone who had nothing to lose. I looked at the documents spread out on the desk. The DNA test proved Graham wasn't my father. The letter suggested Marlene wasn't my mother. The hospital report suggested a security breach. The money suggested a payoff. They bought me, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Or they were paid to take me. Or I was swapped. I thought about the way Marlene looked at me. It wasn't just dislike, it was resentment. It was the look of someone who had been forced to keep a bad purchase because the return policy had expired. Why, I asked, if I am not theirs, why keep me? Why not just give me up? That is the question you need to ask them today, Caleb said. But look at the money. Rhea, $500,000 in the early 90s. That saved the firm. That bought the house in Maplewick. That paid for the country club. You were not a daughter to them. You were the down payment on their lifestyle. I felt a wave of nausea. All the times I had felt like a burden. All the times I had apologized for costing them money. All the times I had worked overtime to pay their property taxes. I had paid for my own cage. There is one more thing, Caleb said. He opened a folder on his desk. The settlement agreement references a second party. The name is redacted here, but Evelyn managed to find a partial trace on the wire transfer. The money did not just come from the hospital's insurance. A portion of it came from a private account. Who? We do not know yet, Caleb said, but the routing number traces back to a bank in Boston. A bank used by old money families, whoever the other family was. The family involved in this swap, they were powerful, maybe more powerful than the Windermoors. I stood up. I carefully gathered the documents. I put the DNA test, the letter, the hospital report, and the bracelet back into the envelope. I did not seal it. I wanted it ready. You have a choice, Caleb said. He stood up as well. You can walk away. You have enough here to sue them for fraud, for emotional distress. You can leave them alone and live your life. No, I said. The word was cold and hard. I thought not, Caleb said. A faint, grim smile touched his lips. Evelyn said you were a fighter. She said you were the only one in that house with a spine. I am going to dinner, I said. They are expecting me. Marlene told me to bring the pie. Be careful. Rhea, Caleb warned. When you corner a narcissist, they do not cry. They attack. They will try to destroy your credibility before you can reveal the truth. Let them try, I said. They spent 30 years making me feel like I was nothing. They are about to find out exactly what nothing looks like when it has nothing left to lose. I walked out of the office. The sun was bright now, sharp and glaring against the winter sky. I walked to my car. I placed the envelope on the passenger seat. It sat there like a passenger, a silent partner in the crime I was about to commit. I drove to the bakery. I picked up the pecan pie. I smiled at the baker. I paid with my credit card. I acted like a normal woman on a normal holiday. But as I drove back to the apartment to pick up Finn, my mind was racing. I wasn't just Rhea Windermoor, the disappointment. I was a secret that had been bought and paid for. I was a crime scene that had been walking around, breathing and talking for 34 years, and the people who had committed the crime were waiting for me to come and sit at the kids' table. I gripped the steering wheel. I thought about the DNA report. 0%. It was the most beautiful number I had ever seen. It meant I was free. It meant that every cruel word, every cold shoulder, every moment of rejection wasn't because I was flawed. It was because I was evidence. I pulled into my driveway. Finn was waiting on the porch, dressed in his suit, looking uncomfortable. He saw my face as I got out of the car. He saw the fire in my eyes that hadn't been there when he woke up. "Did you get the pie?" he asked. "I got everything," I said. I patted the heavy pocket of my coat where I had stashed the envelope. "Get in the car. Finn, we are going to a trial." "A trial?" he asked, confused. "I thought we were going to dinner." "Same thing," I said. I looked at the house in Maplewick in my mind's eye. I saw the table set with crystal and silver. I saw the empty space where my chair used to be. They thought they could remove my seat. They thought they could erase me. But they forgot one thing about physics. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form. And I was about to change from a daughter into a natural disaster. "Let's go," I said. "I don't want to be late." The engine of our sedan was idling in the driveway, but I was not ready to put it in gear yet. Not before I secured my insurance policy, after Caleb gave me the envelope that morning, and after I picked up the pie. I had driven back to our apartment with a singular, terrifying clarity. The DNA test and the hospital report were currently sitting on my kitchen counter, looking like hazardous materials that could irradiate the entire building. I did not just put them in my pocket. That would be amateur. That would be trusting. And I had lost the luxury of trust exactly 2 hours ago. I walked into our small home office and turned on the scanner. The hum of the machine sounded like a weapon charging up. I fed the documents through, one by one. The DNA profile, the letter from Grandma Evelyn, the incident report from the maternity ward, the wire transfer receipt. I saved digital copies to a cloud drive my parents did not know existed. I emailed a zip file to Finn's encrypted work email. I emailed another copy to Caleb Drayton. Then I took the originals, the paper that Graham had held in his hands, the paper that smelled of the hospital archive, and I slid them into a safe box in the back of our closet. I locked it. I took the photocopies, high resolution, crisp, undeniable, and placed them into a fresh envelope. A red one. It was festive. It was the color of blood and warning signs. This was the envelope I would take to dinner. If they destroyed it, if they tore it up or threw it in the fireplace, I had the originals. I had the digital footprint. I had the truth backed up on 3 different servers. Finn watched me from the doorway. He was adjusting his tie, but his eyes were fixed on my hands. "You are planning for a war," he said quietly. "No," I said, sealing the red envelope. "I am planning for a family reunion. In this family, there is no difference." I checked my phone. There was a notification from Instagram. It was a post from Sloan, uploaded 30 minutes ago. I clicked on it. The image was a masterpiece of manufactured joy. It was a flat-lay photo of the dining table at Maplewick, set with the gold-rimmed china and the crystal goblets. The lighting was warm and filtering through the sheer curtains. The caption read, "So grateful for a full house and full hearts. Can't wait to share our big news with the people who matter most." Blessed family legacy. Thanksgiving. I scrolled through the comments. Aunt Sarah. "So proud of you. Sweetie, you make everything beautiful." Cousin Mark. "Looking forward to the big announcement." We are already celebrating Marlene Windermoor, my perfect girl. The table looks stunning. There was no mention of me. I was not tagged. I was not referenced. To the digital world. The Windermoor family consisted of Graham, Marlene, and Sloan. I was a ghost before I even arrived. It made me think of the call I had received 7 days ago. The call that had set this trap. My phone had buzzed during a staff meeting. It was Marlene. She never called during the day unless she needed something logistical, so I had stepped out to answer. "Rhea," she had said, her voice brisk and devoid of pleasantries. "Thanksgiving. We are doing a full sit-down dinner this year. 23 people. The senator might stop by for dessert." "Okay," I had said, staring at the gray carpet of the hallway. "What can I bring?" "Just the pie," she said. "But I need you there at 2:00. The caterers are useless with the table settings. I need you to check the silverware placement and fold the napkins. You know how to do the bishop's hat fold." It wasn't a request. It was a roster assignment. 2:00 is early. "Mom," I said. "Finn and I were planning to—" "Finn can come at 5 with the rest of the guests," she interrupted. "Actually, tell him to park on the street. We need the driveway clear for the heavier cars. And Rhea." "Yes." "Sloan has a big announcement," Marlene said. Her voice softened into that reverent tone she reserved exclusively for my sister. "We want everything perfect. Do not bring any of your moods. Just be helpful. We want this to be a happy memory." A happy memory. The phrase tasted like ash in my mouth. She wasn't protecting the holiday. She was protecting the stage she had built for Sloane. She wanted me there as a stagehand, not a cast member. "I will be there," I had said. Finn had asked me that night, as we lay in bed staring at the ceiling. "Do you want to go?" It was a simple question. In previous years, I would have answered, "Of course, it's family," or "I have to. It's tradition." I would have swallowed the dread and called it duty. But this time, I didn't answer right away. I thought about the 6 months of silence since the funeral. I thought about the way they had moved on without me, like a body rejecting a transplant. "I don't want to go to dinner, Finn," I had said, my voice frighteningly calm. "I want to go to a crime scene." Now, standing in my home office with the red envelope in my hand, I felt the final piece of the armor click into place. "We need rules," I said to Finn. He looked at me, his jaw set. "Rules. When we walk in there," I said, "they are going to try to separate us. Marlene will send me to the kitchen. She will put you at the kids' table or in the corner. Let them—" "I am not letting them treat you like a servant, Rhea," Finn said, stepping forward. "Not today." "No," I said sharply. "You have to let them. You have to let them do exactly what they always do. I need you to be a witness. Finn, I need you to watch them. Don't intervene. Don't defend me. Don't start a fight." "Why?" he asked. "Why are we walking into an ambush if I can't fight back?" "Because," I said, sliding the red envelope into the inside pocket of my blazer, "I am not looking for a fight. I am looking for a confession, and people only confess when they feel safe. They need to feel like they are in control. They need to feel like they have won. Only then will they say something true." Finn looked at me for a long moment. He saw the shift. He saw that the woman who used to cry in the bathroom because her mother criticized her haircut was gone. In her place was someone who had calculated the blast radius. "Okay," Finn said. "I stay quiet. Unless they touch you." "If they touch me," I said, "you won't have to do anything, because I will break their hands." I grabbed my car keys, but before we left, I had one more stop to make in my mind. I thought about the conversation I had yesterday with Aunt Jo. Josephine Haraway was my father's sister, but she was the only one who had never bought into the family mythology. She lived in a small cottage on the other side of town, drank boxed wine, and painted terrible watercolors. She was the only one who had called me after the funeral to ask if I was okay. Not if I was useful. I had met her for coffee 2 days ago. I hadn't told her about the envelope. Grandma's instructions were strict, but I had told her I felt like something was coming to a head. Jo had looked at me over the rim of her mug, her eyes sharp and unblinking. "Rhea," she had said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you are poking a bear. But it is not a bear. It is a viper's nest. I just want them to respect me, Aunt Jo." I had lied. "No, you don't," she had said. "You want them to see you, and that is dangerous. Because if Graham and Marlene truly see you, they have to see what they did to you, and narcissists will burn the world down before they look in a mirror." She had reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Your mother," Jo said, "will not let you touch the truth without making you dirty first. If you go after them, wear clothes you don't mind ruining, because they will throw mud. They will throw slime. They will rewrite history to make you the villain. I am already the villain in their story." "Jo," I had said. "Then be a good one." She had smiled, a sad, crooked smile. "Villains are the only ones who change the world. Heroes just keep the status quo." I came back to the present. The apartment was quiet. The scanner was off. The evidence was secured. I looked down at my wrist. I wasn't wearing the watch Finn gave me. I had taken it off. Instead, I had slipped the plastic hospital bracelet into my pocket, right next to the envelope. I pulled it out for a second. Windermoor, M, Beta, 0215. I ran my thumb over the plastic. It was so small. It was a circle of plastic that had defined my entire existence. For 34 years, I had wondered why I didn't fit. I had wondered why the air in that house felt thin when I breathed it. I had wondered why my father looked at me with a vague, distant guilt, and why my mother looked at me with a sharp, specific resentment. I thought it was because I wasn't smart enough, or pretty enough, or successful enough. I looked at the bracelet. I never belonged, I whispered. The realization should have been lonely. Instead, it was liberating. If I didn't belong to them, then their rules didn't apply to me. Their disappointments were not my burden. Their shame was not my inheritance. If I don't belong to this house, I said aloud, then I belong to the truth. Rhea, Finn called from the living room. We are going to be late. Coming, I said. I put the bracelet back in my pocket. I buttoned my blazer. I checked my lipstick. I walked out of the door and didn't look back at the apartment. I was walking toward the car, toward the highway, toward Maplewick. I was driving into the lion's den, but for the first time in history. The lion was the one who should be afraid. I wasn't bringing a chair. I wasn't bringing an apology. I was bringing the fire. Let's go, I said to Finn as I slid into the driver's seat. I think the table is finally set. We arrived at the Windermoor estate at exactly 2 p.m. The driveway was already filling up with cars that cost more than the average American home. There was a silver Bentley belonging to the senator, a fleet of black SUVs, and my father's pristine vintage Jaguar displayed prominently near the garage like a museum exhibit. I parked our sedan between a hydrangea bush and a service van. It was the only spot left, or at least, the only spot where our car would not offend the aesthetic of the driveway. Remember, I said to Finn, turning off the ignition, we are observers. We are scientists in a lab. We do not tap on the glass. Finn adjusted his collar. He looked handsome in his charcoal suit, but I could see the tension in his jaw. He hated coming here. He hated how small they tried to make him feel. I am ready, he said. But if she speaks to you like you are the help, Rhea, I am going to have a hard time staying scientific. She will, I said. And you will let her, because every insult is just more fuel for what comes next. We walked up the stone path. The front door was unlatched, allowing guests to drift in and out. The air smelled of roasting poultry, sage, and the expensive, powdery scent of lilies that my mother insisted on having in every room. Regardless of the season, we stepped into the foyer. It was crowded. Cousins I had not seen in a year were laughing, holding crystal flutes of champagne. My Uncle Robert was telling a loud story about his golf game. Marlene was standing by the staircase, directing 2 servers who were carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres. She looked immaculate. She wore a dress of heavy cream silk that draped perfectly over her frame, and her hair was an architectural marvel of blonde waves. She saw us. Her eyes flicked to me, then to Finn, and then back to the server. No, not the crab cakes yet, she instructed the staff member. Take those to the sunroom. The shrimp goes here. She turned to us only after the server had walked away. She did not smile. She did not open her arms. She looked at us with the frantic, distracted energy of a wedding planner dealing with a vendor who had arrived at the wrong loading dock. You are here, she said. You are 10 minutes late. Hello, Mother, I said. Happy Thanksgiving. Hello, Marlene, Finn said, extending a hand. You look lovely. Marlene looked at Finn's hand as if it were a wet fish. She gave a tight, microscopic nod but did not reach out. Finn, the coat closet is full, she said. You will have to put your things in the mudroom off the garage, and try not to track leaves in. The floors were just waxed. She turned back to me before Finn could respond. He slowly lowered his hand, his face darkening. Rhea, I need you in the dining room immediately, she said. The caterers are incompetent, the place cards are a disaster, and I need someone to check the water glasses for spots. You know how Graham hates spots. I brought the pie, I said, holding up the box. Just put it in the kitchen, she waved a hand dismissively, although I doubt we will need it. The caterer brought a croquembouche. It is much more festive. But put it on the counter anyway. Maybe the staff will want some later. She spun on her heel and marched away toward the living room, where the important guests were gathered. Finn stood there, holding his coat, He looked at me, and I saw a vein pulsing in his temple. "She didn't even say hello to me," he whispered. "She told me to use the servants' entrance." "Go to the mudroom," I said softly. "Hang up your coat. Take a deep breath. Remember the plan." I walked into the dining room. It was empty of people, but full of expectation. The table was a long, shining expanse of mahogany extended to its maximum length. It was set for 23 people. The china was the wedding set. Gold-rimmed and delicate, the centerpieces were cascading arrangements of autumn leaves and white roses. I walked slowly around the perimeter of the table. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I looked at the place cards. They were handwritten in calligraphy on heavy cardstock. Graham Windermoor, head of the table. Marlene Windermoor, foot of the table. Sloane Windermoor. To Graham's right, Senator Sterling. To Graham's left. I walked down the line, cousins, aunts, business partners, even the neighbor, Mrs. Galloway, had a seat. I got to the spot where I usually sat. Third seat on the left. The card did not say Rhea. It was a blank white card. On it, printed in generic block letters, was the word reserved. My stomach tightened. It wasn't just that they hadn't written my name, it was that they had actively decided to anonymize the space. A reserved sign is what you put on a table in a restaurant for a stranger. It is a placeholder. It is not a welcome. Marlene bustled into the room again, checking the alignment of the candles. "Mom," I said. "Where is my card?" She didn't look up. She was adjusting a fork. "Oh, we ran out of the card stock. The calligrapher only sent 22. It doesn't matter. You know where you're sitting." "And where is that?" I asked. "Well, actually, there is a slight change," she said, finally straightening up and smoothing her dress. "Since the senator brought his wife unexpectedly, we are a bit tight at the main table. I thought it would be best if you helped serve the first course. It helps things flow. You can grab a plate in the kitchen after the soup is cleared." I stared at her. "You want me to serve at my own family Thanksgiving?" "Don't be dramatic, Rhea," she snapped. "Someone has to facilitate. You know the kitchen layout. It is just practical. You can eat standing up or pull a stool to the island. It is more relaxed in there anyway." "And Finn?" I asked. "Where does my husband sit?" Marlene gestured vaguely toward a small, folding card table set up in the corner, near the swinging door to the kitchen. It was lower than the main table. It was set with paper napkins, not linen. Seated around it were 3 toddlers, my cousin Mark's children, and a high chair. "We put Finn at the overflow table," she said. "He is good with kids, and honestly, he wouldn't have much to contribute to the conversation at the main table. Graham and the senator are going to be discussing zoning laws. It would just go over his head. He would be bored." It was a masterclass in cruelty. She wasn't just excluding us. She was categorizing us. I was the servant. Finn was the child. We were the support staff for the main event. "I see," I said. My voice was steady. "So I am in the kitchen, and Finn is at the kids' table. It is just for one meal. Rhea," she sighed, checking her reflection in the buffet mirror. "Stop acting like a martyr. It is unbecoming." Just then, the double doors opened and Graham walked in. He was holding a tumbler of scotch. He looked older than I remembered. His face was puffy, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an exit. He saw me. He froze for a fraction of a second, then forced a tight, pained smile. "Rhea," he said, "you made it?" "I did," I said. "Mom was just explaining the seating arrangements, or the lack thereof." Graham winced. He took a long sip of his scotch. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the centerpiece. He looked at the window. He looked anywhere but at his daughter. "Listen," he muttered. Let's have a nice day." "All right. The senator is here. It is important for the firm. Don't make it difficult. Just go with the flow." "I always go with the flow. Dad," I said. "That is my role, isn't it? The path of least resistance?" "Good," he said, turning away. "Good." He was a coward. A wealthy, well-dressed, powerful coward who would sell his own flesh and blood to avoid an awkward conversation. Then, The atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a physical change in air pressure. Sloane entered. She was glowing. She wore a dress of emerald velvet that hugged a small, barely there bump in her abdomen. Her hair was pulled back in a loose chignon. She held a glass of sparkling cider. "Rhea!" she cried out, her voice a melodic chime. She crossed the room and wrapped me in a hug that involved no contact with her torso, just a light pressing of cheeks. She smelled of vanilla and entitlement. "You look sturdy," she said, pulling back and looking me up and down. "That blazer is very practical." "Hello, Sloane," I said. "I am so glad you came," she said, lowering her voice to a theatrical whisper. "I know these big family things are hard for you. You are so brave to come. Really, I always tell Mom. Rhea is the strong one. She can take anything. She doesn't need to be coddled like me." It was an insult wrapped in a compliment, dipped in poison. She was framing my exclusion as a testament to my durability. I was a truck. She was a Porsche. Trucks don't need garages. They can stay out in the rain. "I am very strong," I agreed. "You have no idea." Sloane smiled vacantly and turned to Graham. "Daddy, come see the baby shoes Aunt Sarah brought. They are Dior. Can you imagine Dior for an infant?" They walked away, arm in arm. The picture of the perfect family. I stood alone by the sideboard. I watched the room fill up. Guests were filtering in, taking their seats. I heard snippets of conversation floating through the air. "Is Rhea sitting with us?" Aunt Sarah asked Marlene. "Oh, you know Rhea." Marlene's voice floated back, light and airy. "She prefers to be in the background. She gets anxious if she has to make conversation. We are letting her help the catering staff. It gives her something to do with her hands." "Poor thing. You are a saint, Marlene," Sarah cooed. "Truly, most mothers would have given up on a girl that difficult years ago." I felt a hand on my elbow. I turned to see Aunt Jo. She was wearing a shapeless gray dress and holding a glass of red wine that was already half empty. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and furious. "Come with me," she muttered. She dragged me out through the French doors onto the back patio. The air was freezing, but it felt clean compared to the stifling heat of the dining room. "They are doing it on purpose," Jo said, lighting a cigarette. Her hands were shaking slightly. "The seating, the kitchen, it is a power play. They want to make sure you know your place before Sloane makes her announcement." "I know," I said. "I expected it." Jo looked at me. She studied my face. "You look different. You look calm. It scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because your grandmother looked like that the day she changed her will," Jo said. She took a drag of the cigarette. "Evelyn didn't make you wait 6 months for fun. Rhea. She knew the timeline. She knew Sloane would announce the pregnancy at Thanksgiving. She knew Graham would be desperate to impress the senator. She timed it. She wanted you to have the ammunition right when they were standing on the highest pedestal." "She was a strategic woman," I said. "She was a vindictive woman," Jo corrected. "But in this family, vindictiveness is just a survival skill. Just be careful, honey. If you pull the trigger today, there is no going back. You lose them forever. I never had them." "Jo," I said, "you can't lose what you never owned." I looked back through the glass doors. I saw Finn. He was sitting at the card table. His knees were hitting the underside of the table. He was trying to make conversation with a 3-year-old who was smashing crackers into the carpet. But then I saw something else. A young man, a second cousin I barely knew, maybe 20 years old, was standing near the buffet. He was holding his phone up. He wasn't just texting. He was recording. He was panning the room, capturing the glamour, the laughter, the toast that Graham was preparing to make. I opened the door and walked back inside. I went straight to Finn. I leaned down and whispered in his ear. "Do you see the kid with the phone, the one in the blue tie?" Finn looked without turning his head. "Yeah, Cousin Tyler. He is live streaming or doing a story. He has been at it for 20 minutes. "Good," I said. "Good," Finn asked. "If I do this, I said. I don't want it to be a rumor. I want it to be a record. I want witnesses. Finn looked at me. He saw the cold calculation in my eyes. He nodded slowly. Okay, I am ready. Stay here, I said. Enjoy the crackers. I walked away from him. I moved toward the main table. The guests were settling in. The noise was quieting down. Graham was tapping a spoon against his crystal glass. Ting, ting, ting. Everyone, please, Graham announced, his voice booming with false conviviality. If everyone could take their seats, we have so much to be thankful for today. I stopped near the head of the table. I was the only one standing. I was the only one without a chair. Marlene shot me a look of venom. Get in the kitchen. Her eyes screamed. I ignored her. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer. My fingers brushed against two things. The first was the plastic hospital bracelet, cold and hard. The second was the red envelope, thick with the paper that proved my life was a lie. I ran my thumb over the seal. I had given them 34 years. I had given them my labor, my money, my self-esteem. I had given them every opportunity to just be decent. Just ask me to sit down. I thought, just one of you. Ask me to sit at the table. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Graham looked right at me, then looked away. Marlene, is the wine ready? No one asked. No one moved. Okay, I whispered to myself. You made your choice. I gripped the envelope. The time for being a daughter was over. The time for being a disappointment was over. It was time to be the one thing they feared most, the truth. Graham tapped his spoon against the side of his champagne flute. The sound was sharp, a high-pitched ting-ting-ting that silenced the room. I stood by the sideboard, my hands clasped in front of me. I watched my father rise. He looked every inch the patriarch, his silver hair catching the light of the chandelier, his suit tailored to hide the slight paunch of a man who drank too much scotch. He surveyed the table. He smiled at the senator. He smiled at the cousins. He let his gaze drift over everyone except me. Thank you all for coming, Graham said. His voice was rich, practiced. It was his courtroom voice. Thanksgiving is a time for reflection. And when I look around this table, I see so much to be proud of. He raised his glass higher. I want to toast my beautiful wife, Marlene, the backbone of this family, the woman who makes this house a home. Here, Uncle Robert mumbled, raising his glass. And, Graham continued, turning his body toward Sloane, I want to toast my daughter, Sloane. You are the light of our lives. Watching you grow into the woman you are has been the greatest privilege of my career, my life. He chuckled at his own slip, and the room laughed with him politely. It was a joke, but it wasn't. To Graham, family was a career. To the Windermoor legacy, Graham finished. To the legacy. The room echoed. I stood there. I was 10 feet away from him. He had 2 daughters. He had toasted one. The omission was not accidental. It was surgical. It was an amputation performed in front of a live audience. Sloane stood up next. She smoothed her velvet dress over her stomach. She looked down at the table, feigning shyness, before looking up with shining, wet eyes. Thank you, Daddy, she said. Actually, since we are all here, Finn and I have some news. She paused for effect. Marlene clasped her hands to her chest, acting surprised even though she had undoubtedly scripted this moment. We are having a baby, Sloane announced. The room erupted. Chairs scraped back. Ants squealed. The senator clapped Graham on the back. Sloane raised a hand to quiet them. And, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, we have decided on a name. We wanted to honor the woman who made us all who we are. We are going to name her Evelyn. The air left my lungs. Evelyn, my grandmother, the woman who had held me when I cried. The woman who had told me I was the only one with a soul. The woman who had died knowing Sloane only visited her when she needed money or a photo opportunity. Sloane was taking her name. She was stealing the memory of the one person who had loved me, and she was branding her golden child with it. I saw red. It wasn't a metaphor. The edges of my vision literally tinted with a violent crimson heat. "That is beautiful," Marlene sobbed, dabbing her eyes. "Mother would be so proud. She always said you were her favorite. Sloane, she always said you were the one who carried the family spirit. That was a lie. A flat, verifiable lie." I moved. I didn't think about it. My body just took over. I walked into the kitchen. The catering staff looked up, startled. "Excuse me," I said. I grabbed the pecan pie from the counter, the pie I had made, the pie that was actually Evelyn's spirit, dark and sweet and honest. I walked back into the dining room. The applause was dying down. Sloane was sitting back down, basking in the adoration. I walked toward the table holding the pie dish with both hands. Marlene saw me first. Her eyes widened. She stepped out to block my path, her smile tightening into a grimace. "Rhea," she hissed, low enough so the senator wouldn't hear. "What are you doing? I told you we don't need that. We have the croquembouche. Take it back to the kitchen." "It is Grandma's recipe," I said loudly. My voice cut through the lingering chatter. "I thought since we are honoring Evelyn, we should have the one thing she actually loved." "We don't need it," Marlene snapped, her voice rising. "We don't need your contribution. Rhea, why can't you just follow instructions? Why do you always have to make it about you?" I stopped. I looked at the long table. I looked at the 23 faces staring at me. I looked at the empty space where my chair should have been. "I am not making it about me," I said. "I am just trying to find a place to put this down, but there is no room. There is no spot for me. Is there?" I looked directly at Marlene. "Why is there no chair for me, Mother?" The room went silent. The kind of silence that hurts the ears. Cousin Tyler, the one with the phone, lifted his device higher. He knew. He smelled blood. Marlene's face flushed. She was losing control of her perfect dinner. She looked at the senator, who was watching with mild confusion. She looked at Graham, who was staring at his plate. She turned back to me, and the mask fell off completely. "Because," she said, her voice shaking with a mixture of rage and exhaustion, "we wanted a nice dinner. We wanted a dinner with people who make us proud, people who fit in." She took a breath and delivered the line that would end her life as she knew it. "There is no seat for disappointments." The words hung in the air. They were absolute. They were cruel. And they were recorded. I heard a gasp from Aunt Jo. I heard Finn kick his chair back at the kids' table, ready to charge. But I raised a hand to stop him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange, icy peace settled over me. It was the peace of a soldier who realizes the enemy has just walked into a minefield. "Okay," I said. I walked past Marlene. She tried to grab my arm, but I sidestepped her. I walked straight to the head of the table. Graham looked up at me. His eyes were terrified. He looked like a man who sees the executioner climbing the steps. "Rhea," he warned, his voice a low growl. "Don't." "You are right, Mother," I said, my voice calm, conversational. "There should be no seat for disappointments. And I agree. I have been a disappointment to this family for 34 years. But today, I figured out why." I set the pie down on the sideboard. I reached into my blazer pocket. I pulled out the red envelope. I placed it directly onto Graham's dinner plate, covering his untouched turkey. "I don't need a seat anymore," I said. "I just need the truth." "What is this?" Graham whispered. "Open it," I commanded. "Rhea, leave this house," Marlene shrieked. She was rushing toward us. "Get out. You are ruining everything." "Open it," I shouted. The sound of my voice, usually so quiet, so apologetic, cracked like a whip. Graham's hands shook. He picked up the envelope. He pulled out the papers. He saw the DNA test first. I watched his face. I expected shock. I expected him to look at Marlene and ask if she had cheated. I expected confusion. But I didn't get that. I got recognition. He closed his eyes. His shoulders slumped. He let out a long, ragged sigh that sounded like a tire deflating. "Graham?" Marlene asked, stopping a few feet away. Graham, what is it? Graham opened his eyes and looked at me. There was no love in them, but there was no longer any pretense. I knew, he whispered. The room gasped. What did you say? I asked. I knew, Graham said, louder this time. He threw the paper onto the table. I suspected it for years. You didn't look like us. You didn't act like us. But I didn't want to know. Rhea, I chose peace. I chose to keep my family together rather than ask questions I didn't want the answers to. You chose peace. I laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. You chose to treat me like a stranger in my own home because you were too cowardly to ask if your wife had an affair. I didn't have an affair, Marlene screamed. She snatched the paper from the table. She stared at the numbers. 0%. This is fake, she declared. She looked around the room, desperate for allies. She forged this. Look at her. She is jealous. She is jealous of Sloane. She is jealous of the baby. She typed this up on her computer to ruin our Thanksgiving. It is not a forgery. A voice came from the patio door. Aunt Jo stepped in. She walked past the stunned guests. She stood next to me. I was there when Evelyn took the samples, Jo said. I drove her to the lab. I saw her seal the envelope. If that is a forgery, then I am a liar. Are you calling me a liar, Marlene? Marlene's mouth opened and closed. Jo, why would you do this? Because Evelyn knew, Jo said. She knew you people would rather bury a girl alive than admit you made a mistake. It is not just DNA, I said. I pointed to the other papers Graham was holding. Read the rest. Dad, read the hospital report. Read the settlement agreement. It wasn't an affair. Marlene, you didn't cheat. I leaned in close to her. You bought me. That is insane, Marlene spat. You are insane. Then explain the $500,000, I said. Explain the transfer 3 days after I was born. Explain why the bracelet in my pocket has a different timestamp than the hospital records. I pulled the plastic bracelet out and slammed it onto the table next to the wine glass. Explain why I am a beta when Sloane is an alpha. The silence was broken by the sound of the front door opening. A heavy, rhythmic tapping echoed on the hardwood floor of the foyer. Tap, tap, tap. Everyone turned. Caleb Drayton stood in the archway. He was wearing his raincoat. He looked like the Grim Reaper, if the Reaper carried a leather briefcase. Who is that? The senator asked, looking alarmed. That is my mother's lawyer, Marlene whispered. She looked pale. Caleb, what are you doing here? Caleb walked into the room. He didn't look at Marlene. He walked straight to me and stood by my side. I am here to execute the second part of Evelyn Hartwell's will, Caleb announced. His voice was dry and authoritative. The will is settled, Graham said, standing up. We settled it 6 months ago. You settled the primary estate, Caleb corrected. But Evelyn left a codicil, a poison pill, if you will. He placed a blue folder on the table, right on top of the DNA test. This trust, Caleb said, tapping the folder, was established 20 years ago. It contains the bulk of Evelyn's liquid assets, $3 million. It was set to activate only under one specific condition. What condition? Sloane asked, her voice small. The condition, Caleb said, looking at Graham, that the truth about Rhea's parentage be revealed in the presence of at least 3 witnesses. Until then, the money was frozen. But now, he looked around the room. He looked at the senator. He looked at Cousin Tyler recording on his phone. He looked at the stunned catering staff. Now, Caleb smiled, a thin, shark-like smile. The condition has been met, the trust is active, and the sole beneficiary is Rhea. Marlene grabbed the table for support. Mother left $3 million to her, to the girl you tried to erase, Caleb said. And she left something else, a provision for legal funds to investigate the fraud committed at Lake Doran Maternity Pavilion. We have already filed the motion. Graham, the subpoena will be on your desk Monday morning. Graham collapsed back into his chair. He looked at the senator, who was slowly backing away from the table. signaling his wife to get their coats. "I am ruined," Graham whispered. I looked at them. The perfect family, the golden child, the powerful father, the controlling mother. They were all crumbling, and all it took was one envelope and one piece of pie they refused to eat. "Come on, Finn," I said. Finn was already at my side. He put his arm around my waist. He looked at Graham and Marlene with a look of pure disgust. "You people are sick," Finn said. "And the sad part is, you don't even know it." I turned to go, but I stopped at the doorway. I looked back at the scene. The food was getting cold. The candles were burning down. The reserved card was still sitting on the table, mocking me. "You were right, Mom," I said. "There is no seat for disappointments." I pointed at the empty chair. "But you made a mistake. You thought I was the disappointment because I didn't fit in your chair." I swept my gaze over the entire family. "I am not the disappointment. I am the reckoning. You removed my seat, but you can't remove the evidence." I turned and walked out. We walked through the foyer, past the pile of coats, past the framed photos of Sloane, past the lies that had been plastered over the walls for decades. We walked out into the cold November air. The wind hit my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. I heard shouting from inside the house. I heard Marlene screaming at Caleb. I heard Graham trying to explain to the senator, but it sounded distant. It sounded like a TV show playing in another room. I reached into my pocket and felt the car keys. "Rhea," Finn said as we reached the car. "Are you okay?" I looked at him. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "No," I said. "I am not okay." I looked up at the sky. It was vast and gray and indifferent. But I am finally real. I got into the car. I started the engine. And as we drove away, leaving the fortress of Maplewick behind us, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I knew what I would see. I would see a house that was already burning down. Consumed by the truth, I had finally lit a match to. The dinner was over. The war had just begun. 72 hours after I detonated a grenade at the Thanksgiving dinner table. My father filed for divorce. It was not a decision made out of heartbreak. It was a tactical maneuver. Graham Windermoor was a man who understood liability. And right now, Marlene was a liability. He cited irreconcilable differences, but the real reason was printed on the front page of the local society paper's fraud. By filing first, he was trying to distance himself from the radioactive fallout of the secret they had shared for 3 decades. He was painting himself as the duped husband, the victim of a lying wife, hoping the world would forget that he had sat at that table and admitted he knew all along. Marlene did not go quietly. She went digital. I sat in my living room, scrolling through Facebook on a burner phone I had bought at a convenience store. My personal phone had been turned off since Friday morning because the notifications were draining the battery every 30 minutes. Marlene had posted a statement. It was a masterpiece of victimhood. "To my friends and family," she wrote, "I am heartbroken by the events of this week. Mental illness is a tragedy that touches many families, and unfortunately, we are not immune. My daughter Rhea has struggled for years with delusions and emotional instability. The accusations made at our family dinner were the result of a breakdown. We ask for privacy as we try to get her the help she desperately refuses. She was good. She did not deny the DNA test directly. She attacked the credibility of the messenger. She was banking on 30 years of painting me as the difficult one to make the truth look like insanity." I put the phone down. "She is calling me crazy," I told Finn. "She is scared," Finn said. He was pacing the kitchen, checking the locks on the windows for the 3rd time that night. People only lie that loud when they have nothing else left. But the lies were working. My phone vibrated again. It was Sloane. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. I swiped the green button. "Rhea." Her voice was wet, thick with tears. "Hello, Sloane," I said. "I can't believe you," she sobbed. "I literally cannot believe you. Do you know what you did?" "I told the truth," I said. You ruined my announcement, she shrieked. The facade of the grieving sister dropped instantly, replaced by the petulant child. I had a photographer, Rhea. We had confetti cannons scheduled for the dessert course. I was going to be on the cover of the Maplewick Gazette's lifestyle section. And now everyone is talking about your little stunt with the envelope. You made my baby's existence about you. I listened to her breath hitching on the other end. There was no concern for the fact that our parents were divorcing. There was no question about whether I was actually her sister. There was only the outrage that the spotlight had shifted 3 inches to the left. Sloane, I said quietly, Dad isn't my father. Doesn't that matter to you? Oh, who cares? She snapped. Lots of people have stepdads. It doesn't give you the right to destroy a $3,000 dinner party. You are so selfish. You have always been selfish. I hung up. I didn't feel angry. I felt a strange sense of relief. I realized then that Sloane had never seen me as a human being. To her, I was just a background character who had stepped out of line and ruined the shot. But the real world was not as easy to dismiss as Sloane. On Monday morning, I was called into the Human Resources office at the Northbridge Public Integrity Office. My boss, a man named Mr. Henderson, who wore beige cardigans and hated conflict, was sitting behind his desk looking pained. Next to him was the HR director, a woman with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rhea. Mr. Henderson said, "Please sit down." I sat. Is this about the zoning reports? No, the HR director said. She slid a tablet across the desk. On the screen was the video Cousin Tyler had taken. It had 200,000 views. It showed me standing at the table, slamming the envelope down, and announcing that there was no seat for disappointments. This is viral, she said. It is trending locally. It is a private family matter, I said, keeping my voice steady. It is a public display of hostility, she corrected. We work in public integrity, Rhea. Our employees are expected to maintain a level of decorum. We have had calls. People are asking if the woman in the video is the same woman approving their building permits. They are asking if you are stable. I am the victim of fraud, I said. I exposed a lie. Perception is reality. Mr. Henderson said gently, we are going to have to put you on administrative leave. Paid. Of course, just until this blows over. We can't have a circus here. I walked out of the building with a box of my personal belongings. I stood in the parking lot and looked at the gray concrete building where I had spent 10 years keeping my head down, doing the work, being useful. They were casting me out because I had finally made a noise. I got into my car and drove straight to Caleb Drayton's office. When I walked in, Caleb didn't ask how I was. He handed me a check. The trust is active, he said. $3 million, tax-free. It was moved to an offshore holding company years ago to prevent Graham from ever touching it. I looked at the number, $3 million. It was more money than I would have made in 70 years at the Integrity Office. It was freedom. I don't want to just sit on this, I said. I want to use it. Use it for what? Caleb asked. I need to know who I am, I said. The DNA test proved Graham isn't my father, but everyone assumes Marlene is my mother and she just cheated. I need to know for sure. I need a genealogist, the best one money can buy. Caleb nodded. He wrote down a name on a piece of legal pad paper. Mara Huxley. She is expensive, Caleb said. She usually works for probate courts finding heirs for unclaimed fortunes. She finds people who don't want to be found. I called Mara Huxley from the car. She met me 2 hours later in a coffee shop that was loud enough to mask our conversation, but anonymous enough to be safe. Mara was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a laptop that looked like it could launch a missile. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She took the cheek swab I offered. She took the copy of the hospital bracelet. She took the check I wrote her, which was for $5,000 as a retainer. I will rush this, she said. I have access to the private databases, the ones the police use. If you have relatives, I will find them. 3 days passed. I spent them in the apartment with Finn. watching the snow fall and ignoring the reporters who had started camping out at the end of our driveway. Marlene had given an exclusive interview to a local station, crying on camera about her troubled daughter. Then, Mara called. "Come to my office," she said. "Now." Her office was a small room above a bookstore. When I walked in, there were maps pinned to the walls and family trees that looked like spider webs. Mara spun her monitor around. "Rhea," she said, "I ran your sample against the sample you provided from the envelope, the one labeled Graham Windermoor. Zero match. We knew that." "Right," I said. "But then I ran your sample against a profile I built for Marlene Windermoor based on public data, and a sample obtained from a discarded coffee cup your lawyer secured." She pointed to the screen. "Marlene Windermoor versus Rhea Windermoor. Maternal match 0%. The room stopped spinning. It just froze. "She is not my mother," I whispered. "No," Mara said. "She is not. You are not related to the Windermoors, not even a distant cousin. You are a genetic stranger." "But," I stammered. "There are photos. She was pregnant. I have seen the albums." "She was pregnant," Mara agreed. "She gave birth, but she didn't bring that baby home." Mara opened a new file. It was a digital scan of the incident report from Lake Doran Maternity Pavilion. But this version was clearer. Mara had used digital enhancement to read through the redactions. "I found the night shift logs," Mara said. "October 14th. Marlene Windermoor gives birth to a healthy female infant at 2 a.m. At 2:15, the security alarm on the nursery perimeter door is triggered. At 2:30, a second infant is admitted from an emergency transport. No name, just Jane Doe." "The switch," I said, remembering the nurse's words. "It wasn't just a switch," Mara said grimly. "I traced the money again. The settlement, it wasn't paid by the hospital to the Windermoors. It was paid through the hospital." "What does that mean?" "It means someone paid the Windermoors to take you," Mara said, "and someone else paid them to give up their real baby." I felt bile rise in my throat. "They traded me like a car." "It looks like a laundering operation," Mara said. "Laundering children. A wealthy family needs a baby to disappear. Maybe a teen pregnancy that needs to be hidden. Maybe an affair. They need a place to put the child. And another family, the Windermoors. Maybe they had a baby with a health issue, or maybe they were just greedy." "Marlene said no seat for disappointments," I murmured. "Maybe their real baby was the disappointment. Maybe she was sick, or maybe she died, and they swapped her for a healthy one and a paycheck. I am still tracking the other side," Mara said. "But Rhea, look at this." She pointed to a cluster of DNA matches on the screen. "I uploaded your profile to the national database. You don't match the Windermoors, but you have a direct match, a first cousin living in Boston. The family name is Van Doren." "Van Doren?" I asked. "The political family. The ones who own half of the seaport." "Yes," Mara said. "That is your blood, and that is why this is dangerous. If you are a Van Doren, you are an illegitimate secret that was buried 34 years ago, and powerful people don't like it when their secrets start walking around." My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text message from an unknown number. There was no text, just a photo. It was a picture of Finn. It had been taken 10 minutes ago. He was walking out of his workshop, carrying his toolbox. The angle was from across the street, possibly from a parked car. He was in the crosshairs of the frame. Then a second message bubbled up. "Stop digging. The next photo won't be just a photo." I dropped the phone. "They are watching him." I drove home doing 80 miles an hour. I called Finn and told him to get inside and lock the door. When I burst into the apartment, he was sitting on the couch, his face pale. "Are you okay?" I asked, grabbing his shoulders. "Did you see anyone?" "Rhea," he said, his voice shaking. "I got a call." "From who? The person who sent the photo?" "No," Finn said. He looked down at his hands. "From my father." I froze. Finn's father was a high-powered corporate attorney in New York. They barely spoke. Finn had chosen carpentry over law, and his father had essentially written him off. "Your father called you. He said he heard about the Thanksgiving dinner," Finn said. He said I need to control my wife. He said that if you keep pulling on this thread, you are going to strangle us both." "Why would he care?" I asked. "He doesn't know the Windermoors." Finn looked up at me, and I saw the fear in his eyes. "He knows the firm that handled the settlement," Finn said. "He recognized the name on the paperwork you sent me. Rhea. His firm represented the other family, the family that paid the Windermoors." The room went silent. "Your father represents the people who bought me. He said it is bigger than a family dispute," Finn said. "He said it is a matter of institutional security. He told me to take you and go on a long vacation. He offered to pay for it. He said if we disappear for a year, the money will keep coming. But if we stay. He didn't finish the sentence, Finn whispered. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down. It hadn't moved since I arrived. I thought about the money. $500,000 to buy a baby. $3 million in a trust fund to keep the secret. They hadn't just adopted me. They hadn't just taken me in. Graham and Marlene had built their entire life, their status, their house, and their reputation on the cash they received for acting as my jailers. Every time Marlene looked at me with disgust. It wasn't because I was a burden. It was because I was a job she was tired of doing. I was an asset they were managing. And now, the asset was Rogue. I turned back to Finn. I saw the terror in his face. But I also saw the resolve. He wasn't packing a bag. He was waiting for my order. We are not going on vacation, I said. They know where we live. Rhea, Finn said. Good, I said. Then they know where to find us. I picked up the burner phone. I dialed Mara Huxley. Release the name, I said. The Van Dorens. Find the connection. Find out which one of them had a baby in October of 1991. Rhea, Mara warned, this is a declaration of war against a political dynasty. I don't care, I said. My parents, my fake parents, sold me to buy a Jaguar and a country club membership. The family that bought their silence thinks they can threaten my husband. I looked at the picture of Finn again. They want to fight, I said. I'll give them a war. I am going to find out exactly how much I was worth, and then I am going to make them pay it back with interest. We spent the next 48 hours living out of a suitcase in a motel 3 towns over. The black sedan had followed us to the highway entrance, then peeled off, a silent warning that we were being herded, not hunted, yet I met Mara Huxley in the parking lot of a diner in New Haven. She arrived in a battered hatchback that smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. She didn't look like a high-powered investigator. She looked like an exhausted librarian who had seen too much. She handed me a thick folder. I found the hospital logs, Mara said, leaning against her car hood. Lake Doran Maternity Pavilion closed in 1998. The records were supposed to be digitized, but the batch from 1991 was corrupted. Convenient. So we hit a wall, I said. I don't hit walls, Rhea. I climb them, Mara said. She flipped the folder open. I couldn't get the medical files, so I went for the money. Hospitals are businesses. They have audits. I found a discrepancy in the billing archive from a third-party audit firm. She pointed to a line item. October 14th, 1991. Emergency transfer. Patient ID redacted. Destination Saint. Jude's Home for Foundlings. Saint. Jude's. I asked. That is an orphanage. It was, Mara corrected. It was a holding facility for private adoptions. Very exclusive. Very discreet. But here's the kicker. On that same night, a wire transfer was authorized from a shell company called Argus Holdings to the personal account of Graham Windermoor. She pulled out a second sheet. It was a property deed. November 1st, 1991. Mara read. Graham and Marlene Windermoor close on the estate in Maplewick. They paid in cash, $450,000, the exact amount transferred from Argus Holdings minus a 10% handling fee. They sold their daughter, I said, the realization settling in my stomach like lead. They sold their biological child and took me as a replacement. It wasn't a sale, Mara said darkly. It was a swap. You were the payload they had to accept to get the cash. The other baby, their biological daughter, was the price. I needed to hear it from him. I drove back to Maplewick alone. I left Finn at the motel with strict instructions to not answer the door. I knew Graham's routine. On Tuesdays, he drank lunch at the Oak Room. I found him in a leather booth in the back, nursing a scotch. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't look up when I slid into the seat across from him. "I figured you would come," he said. His voice was a rasp. "Who is Argus Holdings?" I asked. Graham flinched. He took a long swallow of his drink. "It doesn't matter. Rhea, it is done." "It matters to me," I said. "I know about the money. Graham, I know you bought the house with the price of your own child. Where is she? Where is the baby you gave away?" Graham looked at me then. There was no arrogance left in him, only a deep, hollow shame. "We were broke," he whispered. "The firm was going under. We were going to lose everything. Then this lawyer showed up. He said he represented a client with a delicate situation. A young girl from a prominent family had gotten pregnant. She couldn't keep the baby. It would ruin her father's career." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That was you. Rhea, you were the scandal. They needed a place to hide you, a nice, respectable family to raise you as their own." "And the other baby," I pressed. "Your baby." Graham closed his eyes. Tears leaked out, tracking through the stubble on his cheeks. "The lawyer said he said a swap was cleaner. If we kept our baby, people would ask why we had twins, or they would ask where the second baby came from. He said our baby would go to a good home, better than we could provide. He promised she would be loved." "So you traded us," I said. "You took the cash. You took the rich girl's bastard, and you gave your own daughter to strangers." "I signed a confidentiality agreement," Graham said. "They told me if I ever spoke about it, they would destroy me. They would frame me for embezzlement. They would put Marlene in jail." "Who?" I slammed my hand on the table. "Who did you sign with?" Graham looked around the empty bar. He leaned in, his voice barely audible. "I never met the family," he said. "I only dealt with the law firm, Rainmere and Associates." The world stopped. Rainmere, Finn's last name. I stood up. My legs felt numb. "Finn's father." "Arthur Rainmere," Graham confirmed. "He was the fixer. He set up the trust. He set up the swap." I walked out of the bar. I didn't say goodbye. I vomited in the parking lot, the sour taste of betrayal mixing with the cold winter air. Finn knew, or his family knew. I had married the son of the man who brokered my sale. I drove back to the motel in a daze. When I walked in, Finn was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his phone. He looked pale. "You knew," I said. Finn looked up. "I just found out. I swear to you. Rhea, I hacked into my dad's old server. I was looking for the Van Doren connection, and I found the invoice, Windermoor settlement. Our dad's signature is on the bottom." He stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "My father sold me," I said. "Your father bought me, and we are just the punchline." "No," Finn said fiercely. "We are the collateral damage. Rhea, I hate him. I haven't spoken to him in years for a reason. He is a monster, but I am not him. I am your husband." "Are you?" I asked. "Or was our meeting arranged too? Did they introduce us to keep the secret in the circle?" "We met at a construction site," Finn shouted, tears in his eyes. "I was covered in drywall dust. You were yelling at a contractor. Nobody arranged that. That was us. That was real." I looked at him. I wanted to believe him, but the paranoia was a vine wrapping around my throat. "I need to know who she is," I said. "The other baby. The one who took my place." My phone rang. It was Mara. "I found her," Mara said without preamble. "Saint Jude's records were sealed, but the placement logs were cross-referenced with school districts. The baby admitted on October 14th, 1991, was placed with a family in Dover. Dover? I asked. That is an hour away. The adoptive parents were listed as private, but I tracked the Social Security number issued to the child. Rhea, you are not going to believe this. Tell me. The child is named Isabella Vance. Mara said, Does that name ring a bell? I froze. Isabella Vance. Everyone in Connecticut knew Isabella Vance. She was the youngest judge appointed to the state circuit. She was brilliant, beautiful, and the poster child for success. She was also running for Congress. Isabella Vance is the Windermoor baby, I asked. Yes, Mara said. And here's the twist. She doesn't know. She thinks she was adopted from a Romanian orphanage. That is her backstory. It is part of her political campaign, the immigrant success story. If this comes out, I said, it destroys her career. It destroys Graham. It destroys Marlene. And it exposes the Rainmere firm, Mara added. It brings down the whole house of cards. I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed next to Finn. He didn't touch me. He just waited. It is Isabella Vance, I said. Finn let out a low whistle. The judge, Rhea, if you go public with this, you are taking down a federal candidate. I don't care about her campaign, I said. I care about the fact that my mother, my fake mother, abandoned her to keep a house. Suddenly, my phone rang again, a number I hadn't seen on my screen since Thanksgiving. Marlene. I put it on speaker. Hello. Mother? I said. Don't call me that. Marlene's voice was jagged, broken. It wasn't the voice of the imperious matriarch anymore. It was the voice of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff. I know you went to see Graham. I know you are talking to that investigator. I know about Isabella, I said. Silence. Long, heavy silence. You can't tell her, Marlene whispered. It was a plea. Please, Rhea, you can't tell her. Why? I asked. Because it will ruin your reputation. Because she is happy. Marlene sobbed. I check on her. I have followed her career since she was in law school. I go to her rallies. I stand in the back. She is happy. Rhea. She is successful. She has a life I could never have given her. If you tell her she was sold, if you tell her she belongs to us, you will break her. You check on her, I asked, my voice rising. You watch her from afar, while you treated me like garbage in your own kitchen. You saved all your love for a stranger you gave away, and you gave me nothing but coldness. I couldn't look at you, Marlene screamed. Every time I looked at you, I saw the deal, I saw the money, I saw the daughter I gave up. You were the reminder of my greatest sin. How was I supposed to love the evidence of my own greed? You are a monster, I said. I'm a mother who chose to stay alive, Marlene snapped. And if you go anywhere near Isabella, if you ruin her life just to punish me, then you're no different. You'll be just as self-centered as I once was. Is that supposed to scare me? No, Marlene replied. It's certainty. You think having the truth means you've already won. The truth is volatile. Rhea, release it carelessly, and everything collapses, your world included. The call disconnected. I looked at Finn. She's not wrong, Finn said under his breath. If this comes out, Isabella Vance falls. The Van Dorens won't stay silent. My father won't either. I got to my feet, crossed the room, and stared out at the dim motel parking lot. I thought about the hospital wristband, Beta. I thought about the Thanksgiving place card, reserved. I thought about Isabella Vance sitting somewhere on a public bench, convinced she had built herself from nothing, never realizing she was proof of a transaction tied to a house in Maplewick. Marlene thinks I'm too afraid to let the truth loose. I said. I turned back to Finn. She forgot one thing. What? Finn asked. I am already dead to them, I said. Ghosts don't care about collateral damage. I picked up my jacket. Where are we going? Finn asked. Dover, I said. I think it is time I met my sister. Rhea, Finn warned. This is dangerous. I know, I said. But Grandma Evelyn left me a note. She said, "The other child didn't die. It was taken away." She didn't write that to make me sad. She wrote it because she wanted me to bring her back. I opened the door. The wind howled. "I am going to build a table," I said. "And this time, everyone sits, even if I have to drag them there by their hair." We got into the car. The road to Dover was long and dark, but for the first time in 34 years, I knew exactly where I was going. I wasn't going home. I was going to the truth. And God help anyone who stood in the way. The conference room at Drayton & Associates was sterile. The air conditioner hummed with a low, artificial drone that did nothing to cool the heat radiating from the mahogany table. Graham and Marlene sat on one side. They looked like a deposed king and queen. Graham was slumped, his tie loosened, staring at a water stain on the leather coaster. Marlene was upright, rigid, clutching her purse as if it contained the last shred of her dignity. Caleb Drayton sat at the head of the table. I sat opposite them. "We are here to finalize the dissolution of the marriage," Graham's divorce lawyer began, a young man who clearly wished he was anywhere else, "and to address the activation of the Hartwell Trust." "The trust is a mistake," Marlene snapped. Her voice was brittle. "My mother was senile. She didn't know what she was signing." "She knew exactly what she was signing," Caleb interrupted. He placed a heavy banker's box on the table. "And she knew exactly why she was signing it. She called it an insurance policy against moral bankruptcy." Caleb opened the box. He didn't pull out a will. He pulled out the sealed settlement agreement from 1991, the one Mara and I had tracked down, the one Graham thought was buried deep in the archives of the Rainmere law firm. "This," Caleb said, sliding the document across the table, "is the purchase order." Graham flinched. He didn't touch the paper. "It is a settlement," Graham muttered. "Standard practice. There is nothing standard about accepting $500,000 to raise a child that isn't yours," I said. My voice was calm. I wasn't shouting anymore. The anger had distilled into something sharper, cleaner. "And there is nothing standard about trading away your own flesh and blood to get it." Marlene turned her head slowly to look at me. Her eyes were cold. Dead things. "We gave her a better life," Marlene said. "We were drowning. Rhea, we would have lost the house. We would have been destitute. And that baby, our baby, she went to a family that could give her everything. Look at her now. She is a judge. She is running for Congress. We did the right thing." "You sold her," I said. "And you bought me. I was the transaction fee." I reached into my bag and pulled out the final piece of evidence. It wasn't a document. It was a diary. Not mine. Marlene's. I had found it in the attic years ago. But I hadn't understood it then. I had stolen it back during the chaos of Thanksgiving. I opened it to a page marked with a sticky note. October 20th, 1991. I read aloud. "The new baby screams constantly. She doesn't smell like mine. I hate looking at her. But we need the money. I have to make sure no one suspects. If she turns out wrong, I will just tell everyone she's difficult. I will tell them she is broken. That way, if the truth ever comes out, no one will believe a crazy girl." The room went silent. I looked up at Marlene. "You didn't just hide the truth," I said. "You engineered a character assassination before I could even speak. All those years you told people I was difficult, antisocial, hard to love. That wasn't parenting. That was public relations. You were discrediting your victim in advance." Marlene's face crumbled. The mask of the grieving mother, the misunderstood matriarch, dissolved. Beneath it was just a terrified, selfish woman. "I had to," she shrieked. "I lived in terror for 30 years, every time you looked at me with those dark eyes. I thought you knew. I thought the Van Dorens would come back and take the money. I had to protect us." "You protected yourself," I said. "You sacrificed me." Graham put his head in his hands. "I saw it," he whispered. "I saw how she treated you. I saw the difference, but I didn't want to look too closely, because if I acknowledged it, I would have to acknowledge what I had done. Cowardice, I said. It is a hell of a drug, isn't it, Dad? I stood up. The trust fund is mine, I said. Caleb has already transferred the assets, but I am not done. What do you mean? Graham asked, looking up. I am filing a civil suit, I said. For fraud, for emotional distress, and I am petitioning the court to unseal the adoption records at Lake Doran. I am putting the Rainmere firm under investigation for human trafficking. You will destroy us, Marlene whispered. You will destroy Isabella. You will destroy everything. No, I said. I'm just turning on the lights. If the room is dirty, that is not the fault of the light switch. I walked out of the conference room. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I left them with the wreckage of their own choices. 2 weeks later, I stood in the lobby of a hotel in Boston. My hands were sweating. Mara Huxley had set up the meeting. It wasn't a reunion with open arms and weeping violins. It was a negotiation of biology. A woman walked in. She was tall, with dark hair and eyes that looked exactly like mine. She was older, sharper, dressed in a suit that cost more than my car. This was Alara Van Doren, my biological mother. She stopped 10 feet away. She looked at me. It was like looking in a mirror that distorted time. You look like him, she said. Her voice was not warm. It was stunned. Like who? I asked. Your father, she said. He died before you were born. My family, they didn't approve. They made the problem go away. We sat in the corner of the lobby. We talked for an hour. It wasn't a fairy tale. There was anger. She had signed papers, too. She had been young, pressured by her powerful father. But she had signed. She had let me go to protect her inheritance. I thought about you, she said, stirring her tea. But I told myself it was for the best. I told myself you were happy. I wasn't, I said. I know, she said. She looked at me with a mixture of guilt and distance. I can't be your mother, Rhea. Too much time has passed. I have a life. I have other children. I am not looking for a mother, I said. I have had enough bad mothers for one lifetime. I just wanted to know where I came from. I wanted to know that I wasn't a mistake. I was just inconvenient. She reached across the table and touched my hand. Her skin was cool. You were loved, she said. For a moment, before the world got in the way. It was enough. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a true one. I walked out of that hotel feeling lighter. I wasn't a Windermoor failure. I was a Van Doren survivor. But the real victory came from the person waiting for me in the parking lot. Finn was leaning against our car. He had just come from a meeting with his own father. How did it go? I asked. I fired him, Finn said. A grim smile played on his lips. I walked into his office, and I told him that I am changing my name. I am taking your name, or whatever name you choose. You disowned your family. They were never my family, Finn said. They were just people I shared DNA with. You are my family, Rhea. And I told him that if his firm tries to fight your lawsuit, I will testify. I will tell the court everything I found on his servers. I hugged him. For the first time in my life, I wasn't being held by someone who wanted something from me. I was being held by someone who chose me. The months that followed were a blur of depositions and headlines. The scandal broke. It was messy. Judge Isabella Vance resigned from the bench when the news came out. But surprisingly, she didn't blame me. She sent me a letter, Rhea. It read, "The truth hurts, but a lie kills. Thank you for waking me up." Sloan was the hardest. She showed up at my new apartment 3 months later. She wasn't glowing anymore. She looked tired. The baby was due in a week. I hated you, she said, standing in my doorway. For weeks, I hated you. You took my parents. You took my name. You took my safety. I took the blindfold off. Sloan, I said. I didn't take anything that was real. She walked in and sat on my sofa. She ran a hand over her belly. "Marlene calls me every day," Sloane said. "She cries. She plays the victim, and for the first time I hear it. I hear the manipulation. I hear how she makes everything about her." Sloane looked up at me. "She did it to me too, didn't she? She didn't ignore me like she ignored you. She consumed me. She made me into a doll because she couldn't control you." "We were both victims," I said. "I was the scapegoat. You were the golden child. Both are abusive roles, just different costumes." Sloane started to cry. Real tears this time, not the pretty, photogenic tears she used to cry at funerals. "I don't want to be like her," Sloane whispered. "I don't want to do this to my daughter." "Then don't," I said. "Break the cycle. Be the mother we never had." I sat down next to her. I didn't hug her. We weren't there yet. But I sat close enough that our shoulders touched. Two women, strangers by blood, but sisters by trauma, deciding to survive. Thanksgiving came around again. It had been exactly 1 year since I walked into the house in Maplewick with a pie and a grenade. I didn't go to Connecticut. I didn't go to a fortress. I hosted dinner at my new loft in the city. The table wasn't mahogany. It was a long, rustic farmhouse table Finn had built with his own hands. It was imperfect. It had knots in the wood. It was beautiful. The guests weren't senators or judges. There was Aunt Jo, who brought a box of wine and a new painting she had made for me. There was Mara Huxley, who had become a close friend. There was Caleb Drayton. Looking relaxed without his briefcase, there was Sloane, holding her baby girl whom she had named Maya, not Evelyn, because she wanted a fresh start. And there was Finn, sitting at the head of the table, carving the turkey. I walked around the room. I felt the warmth. It wasn't the stifling heat of the Windermoor house. It was the warmth of people who wanted to be there. I looked at the place settings. I had handwritten every card. Joe, Mara, Caleb, Sloane, Finn, and in the center, right in the middle of the chaos and the laughter and the love, was my card. Rhea, just Rhea, no last name needed. I picked up my glass of wine. I looked at the empty chair at the end of the table, not because someone was excluded, but because we had left room for anyone who needed a seat. Finn caught my eye. He winked. "Speech," Aunt Jo yelled, raising her glass. I stood up. I looked at the faces around me. I thought about the little girl who used to sit on the stairs, listening to the party she wasn't allowed to join. I thought about the woman who had been told she was a disappointment so many times she had almost believed it. I smiled. "They told me there was no seat for disappointments," I said. And they were right. I placed my hand on the back of my chair. It was solid. It was real. So I said, "Fine. I will build a table where I never have to beg to exist." I sat down, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really hope you enjoyed Rhea's journey of justice and self-discovery. Please leave a comment down below telling me where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts on the ending. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel Juliet Revenge Stories. Like the video and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people. See you in the next one.